This is the Triumph Scrambler 900's factory exhaust. It sounds like this. And this is a $1,000 aftermarket exhaust. This is a long-tailed tit. Cute! But the question remains, is this thing actually worth the $1,000 asking price? Let's find out. Before we get started, I know a lot of you are going to want to know what that exhaust sounds like in more detail when it comes straight from the factory, so I'm going to roll in a longer clip here so we can have a nice baseline for what this bike sounds like. There are two exhausts that people typically run on their Scrambler 900s. One is going to be the Zard exhaust. I see this exhaust on a lot of bikes that are in Europe and definitely some in Australia. So their presence is definitely bigger out there. I had never even heard of this brand until seeing it on the Scrambler 900, so definitely not a huge American presence. There's also the British Custom Shotgun exhaust. This is the exhaust you're gonna see on most custom bikes stateside. I don't recall seeing a custom that was in America that had an aftermarket exhaust and it wasn't that one in quite some time. It does come in a few different variations. The first one being the standard shotgun cut, which has the backs just completely cut flush. And then they have a slash cut, which just angles that a little bit. And I do think this one adds a little bit of overall depth to the design, I suppose. And then there are three heat shield lengths. There's the short, the medium, and the large heat shield lengths. Those heat shields are not included in the price of the exhaust. They are a little bit over $100 that you have to add on top of that for that heat shield, which seems like a little bit of a cash grab for me because who's running this without the heat shield? The stock exhaust does end without a heat shield towards the rear, but like I said, that is towards the rear, out of harm's way. The Zard exhaust was also back ordered from 1 to 4 weeks. They didn't list a specific, it just said 1 to 4, which was another notch against it. And out the door, that exhaust would have been about $1,000 as well. But I did not select the Zard. The British Customs exhaust was ready to ship next day. No matter which option you selected, whether it was the flush cut or that slash cut, all three lengths of heat shield, everything said ready to ship next day. Between the initial cost of the exhaust and that additional cost of the heat shield, I would have been looking at about $800 out the door, 200 bucks cheaper than the Zard. But as you can assume by me saying I would have been looking at, I did not pick that one either. Ultimately, I passed on the British Customs exhaust solely because I wanted something more original. I wanted something to be a little bit more unique to help my bike stand out in a sea of custom scramblers. And I passed on the Zard for two reasons. One, I didn't want to invest $1,000 in a company that I didn't have a working knowledge of. And two, I didn't want to wait potentially a month for it to show up. I really wanted the new exhaust and I am very impatient. Before we talk about what exhaust I did put on the bike, I think it's time I go ahead and get the stock exhaust off the bike. So here's what that looked like. So if I didn't pick the Zard exhaust and I didn't pick the really popular British Customs exhaust, what exhaust did I go with? And was it worth the money? So this is what I went with. It is a 2-into-1 from Vance & Hines, and I absolutely love this exhaust. And the reason I love this exhaust is because it reminds me of my favorite build that I've ever done, and that is my Kawasaki Versys 650. On the Versys, I ran a 2-into-1 system from Two Brothers Racing, and it was also kind of a wider end cap like this with a carbon fiber tip. So I went with the exact same thing for this bike, and I couldn't be happier with it. The 2-into-1 saves a bunch of weight over running 2-into-2 exhaust. Obviously, one of them is missing, but I also like how beefy the end cap is, and a little bit of carbon never hurt anybody. But now for the most important part, let's see what it sounds like. So the question the whole video is here to answer, is that Vance & Hines exhaust worth the almost $1,000 asking price? Honestly, no. Mostly because I don't think any exhaust is really worth that much money for me. If you're doing like really big race stuff and you need the most high performance exhaust ever, sure. But for street bikes, it's generally just a styling exercise. You get a little bit more volume, you might get a slight bit of power, and you definitely shave some weight. But to me, that is not a $1,000 return on investment. I spent about $500-ish on the exhaust for that Versus, and it was my favorite exhaust I've ever had, full stop. And then I spent about $1,000 on the exhaust for my Harley Dyna that looked like this. And I don't know that it was worth it. It sounded good, it looked good, but mostly it just made the bike run even hotter, and it was so loud that it upset my neighbors. This Vance & Hines exhaust does sound good. It sounds way better than factory, and it's not so loud that I think it's obnoxious, but $1,000 is a pretty big ask. So you're probably asking yourself, if I said I wasn't gonna spend $1,000 for the exhaust, but I have the exhaust, how did that work out? I regret to inform you, it is not a sponsorship deal. Companies don't like me. What I did take advantage of though was a sale. Triumph Cleveland was running a sale on this exhaust where I got it for $599 was their list price. And then I found a coupon code online by just searching a bunch that saved me another 15%. So I got the exhaust for just north of $500 all in, free shipping, the heat shield is included. I think that's a really good deal, and I do think it's worth that price. Absolutely worth that price. $500-600 bucks, this exhaust all day long. If you have any feedback on the other exhaust, if you have the Zard or you have the British Customs, drop your comment below and let people know what you think of them. I want to create a little bit of a community here so we can all kind of give each other feedback and discuss the options. Just because the Vance & Hines worked best for me doesn't necessarily mean it's the one for you. I love it. I'm cheap. It looks good. So it worked out great for me, but you might want to go with one of the other options. So if you have hands-on knowledge, drop that below. And of course, if you like this one, hit thumbs up for me. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe. About 85-ish% of my viewers aren't subscribed, so I'd really like to shift that back into the direction that makes more sense. So please support me by hitting subscribe. And last but not least, please support yourself by going out and having some fun, because life is short, you should enjoy it. I'll see you on the next one. I gotta go warm up because it's snowing again. Peace.